Hey everybody, welcome to this next episode of the Improv Loop. This is the lesson I told you were going to hate, if you remember the last lesson, or was it 2 lessons ago where I said that. What you have to do if you want to be able to improvise on the guitar, and some people out there disagree with this, but I'm a firm believer, and a lot of my heroes that are great improvisers have said this too. You have to know the names of the notes on the fretboard to be able to improvise really well. Because you can have all your shapes down, but like if you don't know what chord you're starting on, like say I'm starting on a C chord, well, I have to have a starting point for that C chord. I can either go to this C, this C, this C. I just have to have a starting point, and that's the main thing for what we're gonna be doing. We have to have a starting point. And unfortunately, most guitar players learn the notes on the E string and the A string because of their power chords and their bar chords, and they end up leaving the D, G, and B strings with this big black hole area right here on the fretboard. And that's really the area that you need to concentrate on. More specifically, we're gonna concentrate on the top 3 strings, actually 4, top 4 strings, the high E, B, G, and D strings, because we're gonna break these up into string triplets or string trios, which will be the top 3 strings, E, B, and G, and then the next 3, B, G, and D. Those are going to be the main string trios that we're going to be using throughout the Improv Loop as we learn new shapes and new ideas and new intervals and things like that, little tools to make your improvising a little more interesting. But in order to do that, you have to know the names of the notes on those strings. So with that in mind, I have some tips for you to make this mountain of work that seems like it's sitting in front of you a little bit more manageable. The first thing is to be consistent with your practice and do it every day. And this is a long game. This is not a week or a couple of weeks or a month. This is like a couple months, 6 months, a year's worth of work to really get to know the names of the notes on the fretboard. So it's a long-term game. Be committed to it. And a great way to do this is to start out every practice session just working on one string or one note. And that's a really good kind of tactic I use. I pick every week I pick one key to work on. Like say my key was G for that week. I would find all the G notes on just those top 3 strings, maybe throw in this 4th string, the D string. Just find all the G notes on the whole guitar. That's a really good thing too. Open G. And then just have that either for a day or a week, let G be your focus. And if you're working on your keys too, you can go through the key of G. We'll have more of that on some more advanced lessons in this series. But that's the first step. Keep it really simple and be consistent with your practice. Okay, another thing you can do to kind of keep things simple is just pick one string per day or per week. So let's just say I'm working on my B string. Okay, I've picked a key of G, so I can go up and down the G scale on my B string if I want to. So B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, and then go backwards too. You can do that with a key. You don't have to if it's too much for you to think about. Just go over one string, just going over the natural notes on that string. That's a nice way to chunk things up to where it's not too bad. It's not so bad that it's kind of intimidating. You just go the natural notes. B, C, D, E, F, natural, G, A, B. When you get to the 12th fret, go backwards. B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B. And you don't have to go backwards at first. Just work on ascending, going up the string at first, and once you feel comfortable with that, then start trying to go backwards too. Take it one little tiny piece at a time so you don't feel overwhelmed. And one thing that helps with this is to just try and say the names of the notes in the alphabet, the regular alphabet backwards, or the musical alphabet, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. It makes it a lot easier to go backwards on the guitar, find any note. The next level, once you can do the natural notes on a string, is to start throwing in the sharps and flats. So B, C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E, F sharp, G flat, G, G sharp, A flat, A sharp, B flat, and B. And then go backwards doing that too, but only go one level at a time so you don't overwhelm yourself. What's gonna happen to you if you're anything like me when I first started trying to do stuff like this is my head was just radiating because I was having to think so much. And the person that convinced me that you need to learn the notes on the fretboard, you may think it was a jazz guy or some kind of big improv guy, but it wasn't. It was Joe Satriani. I was at one of his like week-long camps, and one of the first things he said in his first big clinic that he did was like, if you don't know the names of the notes on the fretboard cold, you're kidding yourself. I took that seriously, went home, and I started doing this every day for like 5 minutes, and within several months, I had it down. So if I can do it, you can do it too. Okay, next, a little trick or a tactic that you can use to memorize the notes on the fretboard is go back to all natural notes on that B string and then play leapfrog. And by that I mean go to your open B string and then skip the next natural note and go to the one after that. D, C, E, leapfrog, D, F, E, G, F, A, G, B. And once you do that ascending, you can do it. You can do a descending as well, but say the names of the notes out loud. That'll help you retain the information quicker and better. It can be tough to muster up the motivation to actually memorize the notes on the fretboard because you're like, why am I doing this? I have no reason to do this. It's not making me a better player. It will in the long run. And once we start unlocking some of these other little shapes that are contained on the fretboard with our core kind of cage shapes and triad shapes up and down the fretboard, you'll have a better reason or some more motivation to actually memorize the names of the notes on the fretboard cold. So if I'm playing a 1-4-5 progression in the key of G major, there would be a G major, a C major, and a D major. So what do I play over that? I can't just use a G major scale. I could, but it's gonna sound like I'm playing up and down a scale, right? So when I know this, I'm playing a G. Okay, I know there's a G right here because I know my notes on my high E string. And then I know there's a chord that's associated with that shape. I can play those notes. It goes to a C chord. I can switch my mentality. I know there's a C right here. And I know there's this chord shape associated with it. And I know there's a D right here. And that D note right there is my kind of my anchor point. And back to G. And that's a lot to think about. Don't worry right now. We're not tackling this whole idea of playing over chord changes. All I'm doing is showing you how you're going to apply this later, and you'll have motivation and you'll be glad that you learned all the notes on the fretboard. For now, just commit to it and do your first 5 minutes, just your warm up to your practice time, mainly focusing on the D, G, B, and high E strings to get the names of the notes on those strings. Now, again, pick one string per week, one key per week, or one string or key per day, and just kind of rotate through them until you start to get an idea for it. This will all be reinforced when we start to learn these little shapes and little fragments of scales and little chord tone ideas that we'll explore as we go further and further into the improv loop. But for now, just concentrate on getting the note names down. So the exercise that I have for you, I'm just gonna play a 1-4-5 progression in the key of G major. And I'm gonna play each chord for 2 measures. And that way you have plenty of time to think about these notes. And if it's too much, don't worry about playing along with the jam track. What I want you to do is use your either one string, your high E string, your B string, or your G string, or a combination of all of them to play the root note of whatever chord is going by. So if I'm playing a G chord, play just a G. Put some rhythm to it. If you try to find another G. When I move to a C, I find a C somewhere else. And when I move to a D, and when you go back to the G, just hit the G notes too. Just so you know, I'll point out where the G notes here are for you. High E string, 3rd fret. There's one here on the 5th fret of the D string, the open G string. And then 12th fret of the G string, there's also one there on the 8th fret of the B string. If you want to play a C, you don't have to hit all of them, just choose 1 or 2, you know. Next, for the C, you have 5th fret of the G string, there's one there. There's one here on the 8th fret of a high E string. There's one here on the 1st fret of the B string. Those will be plenty for you to go through. Now you can also do this one on the 10th fret of the D string. And then finally for the D, you can either do the open D string, 12th fret of the D string, there's a D right here. On the 7th fret of the G is a D. There on the 3rd fret of the B, and then there's one 10th fret. And if you can only do one string, just the high E string, that's fine. We're just looking for progress. Start where you are with this. If you don't know any of the names of the notes on the fretboard, that's okay. This is a good place to start. Okay, here's just a little example of how to do this. And you can keep it to one string, that's totally fine. If you're keeping it to one string, just go G here, C on the 8th fret, D on the 10th fret, and that'll be fine. Here you go. Okay, that's it, and so it starts over from there. So that's not too bad, but if you need to make it even easier, what you can do if you have a looper is just program in one chord at a time. So program in just a G chord and work on hitting your G notes and find out where they are. Once you can do that, program in a C chord, just, simple C chord. And work on hitting your C notes on the top 4 strings, and then same thing with the D chord, program in a D. And then once you feel comfortable with all 3 of those chords, then you could use the jam track or put your own loop together with a 1-4-5 progression. Again, as we get farther and farther into this, you'll see more reasons to learn the notes on the fretboard and have even more motivation to get them down just dead cold to where you don't even have to think about it. This is something I do, like if I can't fall asleep, instead of counting the proverbial sheep, I go over the notes on the fretboard. I go over different triad locations and intervals on the fretboard, and it works. It gets me to sleep. If you have any questions at all about how to memorize the notes on the fretboard better, leave a comment below, or if you have any suggestions about topics you'd like to see covered in the Improv Loop, this little series, let me know as well. And don't forget that every Guitar Fem member with a complimentary account gets one complimentary private one-on-one video lesson with me. You can go to guitarfem.com, create your account, and book that lesson on the site. See ya.